Hello and welcome to the second video in my series on art doll making. Today we're going to talk about materials, and more specifically not materials you make dolls out of, but things that you can add to them. I'm going to have separate videos later where we talk more about the materials that dolls can be built out of, but today we're going to talk about elements that can be added to them, and I'm dividing them up into groups again, because that makes it more easy for me. So, first we're going to start with elements that I don't even fully consider to count for what I'm talking about today, because these are more like building materials. So when I think of elements, I think more of things that count as an item you could place on your shelf or somewhere by themselves. These are things that you would normally craft with, and these other items can be as well, but these are trinkets. That would be more the correct word. I'm more focusing on trinkets, but we have like string, plants. I love to use fake plants, bows, ribbons, you know, all kinds of different stuff that you could use for doll making. And now the stuff I really wanted to talk about, which is more trinket-like. And this is in my category of found and bought. So these are things that you could find or buy. So you can see, like, these are shells that I found on the beach, and rocks that I found, well, what would these be called? I don't remember, but I found these in the yard. My mother used to hide them for my sister and I, and there are still some living out there to this day. This is, I think I bought this at Michael's or something like that. But this is the type of thing that you could probably buy at a thrift store or a craft store like Michael's or Hobby Lobby. And as someone who has grown up in a very rural town in Alaska, and without any chain stores or anything, I know how frustrated I used to get when I watched crafting videos and they're like, oh, just pick it up from the dollar store. Because I'm like, we don't have one. So I just want to say to anyone else who's from an area like that where you just can't do some of those things, like, you can make stuff regardless. It might not be the same. It might not be the same quality because, you know, there is definitely benefits to being able to go to the dollar store and pick up a bunch of stuff. But you don't need it to be a successful artist. You can do things anyways. There are still skills and things you can find. Like, if you want to create something, you can create it. You're not tied down by what you have access to, you know? You can make whatever you want. Like, you can find a way. So if you want to do it, you should do it. Don't be discouraged by all the videos that are talking about things at the dollar store. You just might have to learn not to always follow the YouTube tutorials and come up with some things on your own. But it is possible. It is something that you can totally do. So these are my found materials. I also like to pick up little trash-like things that I've found walking around. You know, it's a little dinosaur type thing. And I know it's different for everyone, but for me, when it comes to stuff like this, my rule of thumb is if it's something that I really don't think someone will come back for, they might, because I don't know what someone might or might not come back for. But this obviously just fell off something, and I don't feel like someone would come back for it, personally. Something that's obviously dirty or broken, then I would come back for it. Disclaimer, this doesn't count for anything that's, like, really nice, you know? Obviously, if you're finding something that looks like it's, expensive or important to someone, I would even say stuffed animals or something like that, I would put it somewhere someone could find it. But if it's like a really small random thing, if it's something like that, or if it's somewhere where I honestly don't think people are going to be able to find it, like on a really random road, then I will take it, you know? Like, if I found something in just a building, I might bring it to Lost and Found. But if I'm finding something in the woods or on the street, then I'm probably just going to take it. Again, unless it's like something nice, you know? Or there have been times where I'll find things and then I'll come back and they'll still be there a week later and I'm like, okay, well now it's mine because no one's taken it, you know? So that's my rule of thumb. Obviously, it depends, you know? That's something that you'll have to kind of decide for yourself. And my next collection is stuff that is made. So these are all things that I've made. I make most of my stuff out of clay, as you can see. These are all clay. Little candy for the candy tree I was going to make. We'll see if I follow through with that, though. But I also make a lot of stuff out of hot glue. The ladybugs are hot glue. The dragon head is hot glue, actually. I made a mold of a toy dragon I have and filled it with glue and painted it. But, these are all just things I've made. So for me, at least, there are certain times where I really want to make things out of clay. And when that happens, like, I just make a bunch of stuff. You know, I might not have a project in mind for it yet, but I'll just make it anyways. That way I can have it later when I decide to start a project. Because sometimes for me, the best ways to start a project is just to look at what I have, find something and be like, I want to use this. What could I make to incorporate it? So if you feel like making stuff, just make a whole bunch of stuff, you know? You can make a doll and then make things to go on the doll. You can make stuff ahead of time. You can do it in whatever order you want. I like to just keep stuff like this floating around, you know? I oftentimes have, like, containers of some type that just hold all these little bits and pieces that I've made. And when I make them, I just throw them all in this container. And then I can come back for them later when I decide that I want them. I think it'd be cool to, because this is kind of hollow on the bottom, I might try to do a doll that has, like, the dragon on. It's like a hat of some type, you know? We'll see. This is stuff that I've made. And then this section, we only have one item for it right now. Yes, I highlighted part of a broken cufflink in the face of a drama mask. It'll haunt your nightmares. But this is, like, personal belongings. So this one is really subjective for people, you know? I make a lot of art dolls that to express my feelings, and when I'm going through stressful situations. I have a lot of anxiety, and I make a lot of art dolls that reflect my anxiety, and especially when really obnoxious, annoying, or frustrating things have been happening to me. For me, taking all those things and putting them in a doll helps me to feel better about them. So I wasn't really going to do too many dolls, show them off at this point, but this is my best example of one that I made almost entirely using items that had personal meaning to me. So, like, this doll is made up of a collection of things that I already owned that had sentimental value to me. You know, these were bracelets that I'd worn for years and years and years until they broke. And they were given to me by one of my mother's friends right before I started middle school, which I was super nervous about. I don't remember exactly what they say, but I think this one says, like, strength, you know, bravery or love. Oh, it's an old doll, so it's fallen apart a little. You know? And when I finally couldn't wear them anymore, I put them into a doll. Because for me, it's a good way to save things. This is a bracelet, and this was part of a button from it that belonged to another friend. These are beads from a bracelet that a friend had given me. These aren't actually from a personal belonging, but I put them on here because my grandma loves pearl necklaces. She wears a lot of them, and she was sick at the time, so I put this on the doll to represent her and to remind me of her. And this is an example of a found item. It's a fortune from a fortune cookie. Now is a good time for a little solitude. Yeah, this is an old doll. The arm fell off. I need to glue it back on at some point. I'll just lay it there for now, because I'm more of an introvert, and at the time I needed to take more time for myself and was having trouble with that because the world can be very pressuring to, you know, appease people and hang out with them, and I needed to really own that I'm not a people person. I needed more space. So, but these are just an example of, like, items that I've put into a doll, you know? I especially put items into a doll when they break and I don't want to get rid of them because they're important to me. Or when something happens and that person is struggling. You know, like when my grandma got sick, I have multiple examples of dolls that I've made when she's been ill. And when friends have been sick, not always even items that belong to them or were given to me from them, but just things that make me think of them. You know, I had a friend move away and I drew bumblebees on a doll because bumblebees were her favorite animal. You know, so there's, like, different bits and pieces that you can incorporate into a doll. There have been times when I've, like, had to not hang out with people maybe as much as I wanted, or, you know, when you have separations with people, and I've put things from that into a doll, because I don't really want to sometimes keep all of those things, and I'll put bits and pieces of them into dolls to represent that, you know, I've had good times with that person, and just make them part of my healing doll, or whatever. So, I use a lot of personal belongings in the work that I do. Obviously, this is subjective, you know? You might not want to glue your belongings onto a doll. And this goes without saying, but I'm going to say it anyways because I don't know who all watches these videos, and in case there is a child or anyone watching, obviously, don't put something on here that isn't yours, especially if you haven't asked, you know? These things, like, I'm quite a bit older. These things are mine, and I knew that I could do with them what I wanted, you know? If you have something that you think a parent or someone else might care about, or that isn't entirely yours, that belongs to the family, please talk to a parent or a guardian before you put it into a doll. You know, make sure you know, like, let them know. And I still do that with stuff, you know, where I'm like, hey, this has fallen apart. I was gonna cut it up and use it for a doll. Is that okay? You know? So, if you think someone's gonna care about it, just let them know. Let them know what you're doing before you glue it to something. So yeah, this is just sort of an example of materials. Materials, overall it's really simple. Like, you can put anything on a doll, you know? Just whatever you want, gosh, the star arm, whatever you want to put on a doll, just throw it onto the doll, you know? Don't worry about it. Like, you know, found things, little bits and pieces of things. I do mine in different ways. Oftentimes dolls will be holding things, like you can see there. Or I put things on their clothing, you know, you could put that on a piece of clothing. Things on their hair is a big part for me. This one isn't a good example of this, but I've made a lot of dolls that are fixed on bases, and I'll often put things on those bases, you know. I had a doll, I don't know if I still have it or not, I can't remember, that was sitting on a little hill with buttons all over it. It was the Queen of Button Hill. And so I'll make bases for them sometimes and glue things to the bases. So you can use these things all over. And as we get further into the series, there will be examples of different dolls, and we'll talk more about this, and then there'll be, just examples of different ways that you can do some of these things. But, you know, the main takeaway is just use whatever bits and pieces you want. This probably already came up in the other video, but don't try to conform it to the standards of what doll making should look like. Obviously, you know, look up pictures, look up whatever you want. I love to look at, you know, I have a whole Pinterest board for dolls, and I just save things that inspire me. And if you want to try to replicate a doll, I'm not going to tell you not to. Because you know, there have been times in my life when people have been like, oh, you shouldn't copy other people's art, you know, that's not creative enough, where I've showed people things I've done, and when they found out I did it based on something else, they've not liked it as much, or thought it wasn't as special, you know? So I'm not going to tell you that it's not special if you copy it off of something else. If something inspires you, you can totally do it to look like that thing. Obviously, you know, proper credit if you're going to put it out on the internet or anything like that, but don't feel stuck by these borders. Just because you haven't seen someone do something you want to do doesn't mean it doesn't work. Like, do it anyways. And I said this in the last video, but unless, of course, you're making this for a specific person to give it to them, these are your pieces. The only person that needs to like them is you. You can make them look however you want. It doesn't matter if other people don't like them. This should be an expression of you and the things that interest you, the way that you feel. Whatever you want. And we'll talk more about themes at some point as well. But just put things into a doll that are important to you. And they can be silly things, you know, like, why the heck do I even have this? Because I wanted to have it. I've got one that looks like Mickey Mouse somewhere in here. You know, if you want to put something on a doll, put it on the doll. Like, just make it because you want to. Yeah, so this is a little introduction into materials. I hope you found it at least mildly interesting. Hopefully you learned something. I don't think it was overly informative, so probably not, but maybe it will serve as a little bit of inspiration for you. And hopefully there will be another video coming out soon.